Tennessee football staying in the news for better or worse. Right now it's pretty neutral because we'll see how this coaching staff produces coming up here in 2021 following a very volatile offseason already for the Vols, of course, with Jeremy Pruitt's ouster, Josh Heupel, in control now. All right, we got Charlie Burris on the line, joins us on a regular basis to talk up the Vols. Charlie, how you doing today?
I'm doing well. Thanks for having me back.
Yeah, thanks for coming on here. Had you on for a number of years, and always trust your judgment on your beloved Tennessee Volunteers. So let's go back up. Let's start with the latest news. Tim Banks is expected to be announced either later today or Tuesday as defensive coordinator coming in from Penn State. I ran some numbers on him. He's produced the top 20 to 25 defenses pretty consistently, both in regards to points per game and yards per game given up there at Penn State, with some other accolades there. And before that at Illinois, and did a nice job at Cincinnati. So any particular thoughts on Tim Banks and what he's got to work with there at Tennessee this fall?
It's going to be a uphill battle. I mean, I can tell you that. I'll say to Tim Banks, if he ever watches this, good luck. I mean, Tennessee, the tough part in all of this, through the entire coaching search and everything, it's just become very apparent that Tennessee is viewed in the coaching community as a place where coaching careers go to die. That's just the way that it is. I wish it wasn't, obviously. But right now, it should be viewed that way. I mean, let's be totally honest. That's the correct view of Tennessee and the way that coaches should look at it. They're reportedly going to have to pay Tim Banks $1.2 million. He has been a co-defensive coordinator for most of his career, not a sole defensive coordinator. He doesn't, according to what I've read, I mean, admittedly, I don't know a ton about him outside of the research I've done just during this search. But he doesn't have a ton of direct play calling experience, but he is a very solid recruiter, which is huge. And I think Tennessee right now, you just, more than anything, you got to be looking at the Jimmies and Joes if you're Josh Heupel and his staff. And so that's good. But outside of that, there is some, I don't even know how you would categorize it, some weirdness with Tim Banks in that he comes from the Butch Jones coaching tree.
Yeah.
And obviously, Butch Jones, failed Tennessee coach. Tim Banks was Butch's sole defensive coordinator at Western Michigan, and then Central Michigan, and then that was good enough for Butch to get the job at Cincinnati. And then at Cincinnati, Tim Banks was splitting his duties with John Jancic, and Jancic later went on to be Butch's DC at Tennessee. Jancic then later left Tennessee with some murky circumstances and went to go be a position coach for the Tampa Bay Bucks. And he's still kind of been around this whole situation with Heupel and kind of in the, I would say he has tried to put his own name out there for spots at Tennessee. John Jancic has. I think that's probably what is happening. But yeah, it's an interesting history with Tim Banks. His career with Butch ended at Cincinnati, and then he went to Illinois, then to Penn State, and he's kind of been a Big Ten guy since. But on the whole, like you said, has consistently been a part of top 20-ish defenses. Penn State had besides having a pretty terrible season this past year, did have the number 3 defense in the Big Ten. So I just kind of say, do with that what you will. Seems like a decent hire. You're overpaying for him at $1.2 million, but I think that's the situation that Tennessee is in. You have to pay that kind of money to get anybody to come here. Derek Ansley was getting $1 million. So, it just kind of is what it is. But on the whole, it's just going to be a wait and see, and good luck, Tim Banks. That's what I'll say.
Charlie, we caught up with you after the Jeremy Pruitt firing, the Danny White hiring, but not Josh Heupel. So how did you receive that news?
It was about right for the whole situation. I would say that. You bring Danny White here, he apparently takes some swings at bigger guys. Who knows what the exact circumstances are? Some of the reports, and who knows exactly what to believe, but some of the reports around the situation were that he went after James Franklin, which would have been huge. And now that, Tennessee has James Franklin's defensive coordinator, but went after James Franklin, tried to throw big money at him. Apparently it just wasn't big enough. I don't know why in that situation you wouldn't just pony up and be like, okay, we'll give you $8 million if that's what it's going to take. We're in shambles. We got to have somebody. I don't know why that would not be what you would do, but whether that was Danny White's call, the money people's call, whether that is even really what happened, I'll leave that up for you to decide. But that's because Danny White specifically, he conducted his search in a way that is purposefully deceptive. He tried to keep it on the down low, tried to keep it out of the public eye, tried to keep it off Twitter, blah, blah, blah. And so there was that. And then also they tried to go after Clemson's offensive coordinator, Tony Elliott, apparently, and he said no. But as is true with every coaching search, nobody was ever offered the job unless they take the job, so to speak. And so Tony Elliott, quote unquote, chooses to stay at Clemson. And then it seems like Danny White just defaulted almost. And he went, well, I know this guy. I got to hire somebody. Let's go hire him. And he really didn't. It doesn't seem like he took a super hard look around. Maybe he did, and we just don't know it. And that news hasn't come out. In my opinion, I think there's a couple other options you could have gone to. But, nonetheless, here it is. And I think Heupel, if nothing else, his offense is exciting. I mean, you can start there. And so I'm lukewarm on it, but I was expecting to be lukewarm on Tennessee's hire.
Yeah, because that is what Danny White said when he left UCF and went to Tennessee, was that he had a blank slate, that he was going to do a national search. He had no preconceived notions about who's going to get hired, who was going to be the guy, that they were just going to cast the net and really make it a national search. But then he winds up hiring his old coach. So I guess that's got to speak to some degree in a positive vein, that he was impressed enough with being directly Josh Heupel's boss at UCF and then eventually hiring him. But there's no question that he went after that was, in a sense, a default, but at least a default in which he went that route because he must have been pleased with the performance.
Yeah, I think on the whole, that does really seem to be the case. There was a lot of narrative around Heupel. There is still the narrative that he had diminishing returns year over year. Went 12-1 his first year after he took over from Scott Frost's 13-0 year. Their only loss was in the Fiesta Bowl to LSU. I mean, that's an impressive year. Next year, I believe, it was 9-4, and then 9-3 this past year was he had 6-4. And so people were sort of like, oh, it's diminishing returns. The team's getting worse. The recruiting hasn't been very good. And there was sort of just all of those talking points going on. It's so hard to say, what exactly you should take away from the fact that he has had a worse record year over year as a head coach, while at the same time acknowledging he does fit Tennessee's needs. So you can say those two things just have to be true with this hire. He does fit Tennessee's needs so badly. Tennessee needs a reformed offense, and I think Heupel is going to bring that. That's the exact thing he was hired to do. While at the same time, as a head coach, his teams have gotten, quote unquote, worse. But how much do you take away from the pandemic season? How much do you take away from the fact that should UCF even be like a quote unquote, powerhouse program? Was he just kind of returning to the mean there rather than failing, I guess, is how I could put it. I mean, their recruiting classes that they were bringing in before Scott Frost and during Scott Frost were in like the 60s and 70s rankings wise. It was about the same with Heupel, and maybe just those couple 3 teams that had incredible years were sort of outliers, and UCF is just kind of meant to be more of a 9-4 team. You could analyze it 100 different ways, I think. And so I just on the whole, I do go, he fits what Tennessee's looking for. That's great, but he has to prove it with being a head coach. Is he going to be a overly sensitive micromanager like Butch Jones? Is he going to be flippant and almost, I don't even know what you would consider Jeremy Pruitt. I always felt like he never even wanted to be at Tennessee. Hopefully Heupel's not going to be like that. And you just kind of go, here we are again as Tennessee. It wasn't the splash hire you wanted, but was that ever really going to happen? And so that's kind of my cursory take on Heupel, I guess.